Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Good to see the Orc Slayer here. And we have a lot to talk about. I'm actually in a really good mood. I wish that we could release this documentary that we're working on today, just because the music that we've had produced for it is so good that I can't possibly do it justice. But tonight's topic, we are dealing with when the wind-up toys attack. It's interesting to see how few people or how many people are beginning to exhibit serious doubt concerning the official narrative of these increasingly common mass shootings and school shootings and other shootings, typically in gun-free zones. There we go. You know, there's a common theme to a lot of these. Number one, they usually take place in gun-free zones. So somebody obviously is concerned about not accidentally becoming a target. Does that really sound like a whacked out guy who is at least open to the idea of shooting himself? Do you think that they are so concerned about racking up an impressive kill count that they have that they're worried about it? We know for a fact that the CIA is perfectly willing to kill Americans in order to further its policy. Semperfish mentioned Operation Northwoods. This is declassified. People know about it. And, the thing that keeps popping up time and time and time again is there's a gun-free zone. Witnesses report multiple shooters, and then a single shooter is either arrested or found dead. And when the person is arrested, they tend to look so strung out and so drugged up that they don't look like they are capable of reciting the alphabet, let alone going in and shooting up a shopping mall. Or, and that's, when we're talking about false flags, we're not saying that the event didn't happen. A false flag means that the event is taking place under false colors. So for, where the term was first used was when a ship would approach another ship, and they would try to get close to the other ship by flying, a French flag if it was a British ship, or a neutral flag, or something like that. And so, it doesn't mean that the event is a complete hoax. That's why. That's why people were talking about possible hoaxes like the Boston Marathon bombings. Alex Jones took a lot of criticism and a lot of heat for talking about Sandy Hook as being a hoax and that sort of thing. But the fact that they're pushing this theme of conspiracy theorists being terrorists, which is total nonsense. I mean, Absolute nonsense. A conspiracy theorist merely means somebody who doesn't believe the official story. I don't believe the official story. I don't believe any official story coming from the US government. You know why? Because I read history. I know about the lies related to the Lusitania. I know about the lies related to the Gulf of Tonkin. I know about the lies related to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know, welcome Scott Daly. You know, we know for a fact that governments lie to the people, and they have done so since before the Roman Empire. You know, this is not new. In fact, the one thing that you can almost certainly guarantee to be true is that whatever the official narrative is false in some respect. We may not know what respect, but we know it's false. That's right. Here in Europe, look up Operation Gladio. The amount of lies that are pushed on people are almost more than you can keep track of. And so my fundamental assumption is that whatever the official story is false. I don't know where it's false. I don't know how it's false. And frankly, most of the time, I don't care. You know, that's why I don't get worked up over these mass shootings and this, that, and the other thing. We know that there is something false about them. What? We don't know. You know, but I mean, listen, you know, somebody mentioned that there were early talks about the shootings in El Paso being cartel related. And that's certainly plausible. The violence in Mexico is completely out of control. Somebody mentioned that there were, Ader says it was first reported as gang-related terrorism cartel violence and that there were 3 shooters. Okay. Well, the AP, in its report that is linked to on Drudge, says, as a witness, a Hispanic woman named Adriana Quetzada, she says, I heard the shots, but I thought they were hits, like roof construction, said Adriana Quetzada, 39, who was in the women's clothing section of Walmart with her 2 children. Quetzada said she saw 4 men dressed in black, moving together, firing guns indiscriminately. Police confirmed only 1 gunman. Quetzada's 19-year-old daughter and 16-year-old son threw themselves to the ground, then ran out of Walmart through an emergency exit. She said they were not hurt. Police said by mid-afternoon that a suspect was in custody and the public was no longer in danger. Gomez said the suspect, he must be the police chief or something, who used a rifle was arrested without incident. Police believe he was the sole shooter, but are continuing to investigate reports that others were involved. Well, I think we all know what's going to happen. You know, they'll just ignore those witness reports. They all disappear, and you can't even look them up eventually. And so, I mean, Angry Polar Bear has a good point. Eyewitness reports are always unreliable. Fog of war. Yes, absolutely. There's no question. But what are the chances? How likely is it that people keep reporting the same sort of thing over and over again, and then they end up arresting this bug-eyed, drugged-out, young loser who doesn't seem capable of getting into a car and starting the car? I mean, did you ever see the video of the kid that supposedly was responsible for committing the school shootings in Florida? that kid didn't look like he knew what month it was. He didn't look like he knew what his name was. But we're supposed to believe that he, efficiently, went through and killed all these people. Maybe he did. But the more that this sort of thing happens, the more that you see the report, you hear the eyewitness reports. I mean, the kind of detail that eyewitnesses usually get wrong is they might say they thought there were 4 people when there were actually 3. They might think they might have thought there were 4, but there were actually 6. They couldn't see them all. Welcome, Carl Philip Gabler. But to invent, or maybe they might say black, and it turns out that they were wearing dark brown camouflage or something. But to imagine out of whole cloth 4 men, all of whom were armed and firing, that seems more than a little bit unusual. Maybe she's wrong. Maybe she's lying. But to simply dismiss it out of hand because the official story is this is exactly the same as all those other situations. It's just crazy. And it's interesting to see how many people are now openly expressing doubt. Now, I'm sure part of that is because of Q. Q warned that something was going to be happening soon. I don't regard this as, absolute proof and so forth. Yeah, and I think that, I don't know, at least, somebody says the Florida shooter was 100% a fall guy. He was actually in the school at the time of the shooting via reports from survivors, and there were eyewitness reports of a shooter in full military garb. Right, and so, and the thing is, it's even possible that the police are not involved in the conspiracy thing. I mean, it's also possible that it's not some sort of nefarious U.S. government factor. It's possible that these things are being, that these are external terrorists and they're trying to keep it under the table in order to avoid panic. That's also possible. I think it's less likely, just because why would they have these, how would they have these patsies on hand? And so I'm not saying that I know what happened. I'm not saying that there's absolutely no chance that any of these events took place exactly as they are described. I'm simply saying that I'm skeptical, and a lot of other people are becoming very skeptical. I think it's a mistake to start saying, oh, it's MK Ultra, it's this, it's that, it's all we know is that it's the official story, and the official story is always wrong. It's always false, because it's never in the bureaucracy's interest to tell the truth. And they have lots and lots of reasons to not tell the truth. And it is true. There is almost always some sort of drill scheduled for near the same place. But that's where you're getting into the idea that that there's that they're hoaxes. I think that I think maybe some of them are hoaxes, maybe some of them are, but I expect that most. Yeah, and Anthony Valente has a good point. I'm sure we'll never see any of the videos from the dozens of cameras in Walmart. Yeah, that is always the strange thing, is that there's videos and camera phones all over the place. We can see all sorts of accidents and various crazy things that happen because of the the cameras in the UK, the dashboard cams that are so common in Russia for insurance purposes and so forth. And so you look at this, and it's just it just defies credulity. I mean, my natural tendency when there's breaking news used to be that okay, that's happening. At this point, I think that I would find it hard to believe if they said, a hurricane is hitting New Orleans. My first instinct now is, maybe it is. There's an interesting scene in Neil Stephenson's latest book, which is called Fall. And he talks about how they create they create a hoax and create an impression that an entire town in, I believe, somewhere in Utah got nuked. And the whole thing is just a giant internet stunt. They cut the city off. They showed fake footage from an airline passenger and a trucker, with the mushroom cloud and all that sort of thing. And for hours, in some cases days, everybody believed that the town had actually been nuked, and they were all, trying to, Moab, Arizona. That was it. And so, it was an interesting thought experiment. It was, the book is not great, but it does have some very interesting elements, and that was one of them. How hard would it be to convince the news media that something like that had happened? So it's interesting to see that people are beginning to wake up to this kind of stuff. A lot of people were very dubious about the Christchurch incident. The more incidents that happen, the more incidents that take place, the more skeptical people get, because it's not working. What are they trying to convince people of? To disarm themselves? Most people's reaction is, if people are running around with weapons in malls, then I damn well better have my weapon with me. And so, I think that when you look at why are they still trying to do this sort of thing, it's because it worked back in the day. Remember, the people making decisions are probably boomers. And it worked on boomers. Boomers believe everything they see on TV. Generation X is cynical. The millennials, they don't seem to buy into it much. And the Zoomers are absolutely and totally skeptical. I mean, I've talked to a few teenagers and 20-somethings, and when they hear about these things, they just snort. Like, yeah, whatever. And so, um, when you look at this stuff, um, and you know that the people who are making these decisions are almost certainly boomers, it shouldn't be terribly surprising that they can't believe it's not working. They can't believe that people are not reacting to this the way that people did in Australia, or in Australia after the shootings in Tasmania, and in England after the shootings in Scotland. That's how the model is supposed to work. There's a big terrible event, and everybody, uh, you know, says, "Oh, we'll run to the government and we'll trust the government." And so that doesn't work anymore. But when people say, "Well, why are they still doing it if it doesn't work?" It's because they they don't know they don't know what else to do. We're not dealing with rocket scientists here. If you're somebody who is so corrupted by evil that you're willing to do something like this, what is left of your mind? I agree with TW. He says, if they couldn't enact their anti-gun plans after Sandy Hook, then it's never, ever going to happen. I totally agree. I totally agree. When you look at, oh yeah, this is a good point too. Imperial Britain says, have you read the manifesto? Seemed kind of generic and not very in-depth. These manifestos are fake. That Christchurch manifesto was absolutely a cut and paste job done by multiple. You could see that different people had written different sections. And so, it's funny. Whenever you are hearing a report about something, look at the language, and especially look at the dialogue. Normal people can't write dialogue. That's how I can spot fake stuff very easily, and that's why any editor can spot fake stuff very easily. In fact, I think that when you look at, any good writer is going to look at these kind of things and just laugh. The reason is because most people get their ideas about how people talk from television. And so they will use phrases and patterns of grammar that are going to ring false to you because they're imitating stuff that's false in the first place. It's kind of interesting. One thing you'll notice, in fact, when you're looking at, and this is just in general, not necessarily related to manufactured events and whatever, but when most people write dialogue, they have a series of question and answers. And this is necessary in fiction because you're actually giving information to the reader. But the reality is that when most people talk, they make statements. In fact, a lot of conversations are two people taking turns talking about different subjects that are of interest to them. And so it's really interesting to see how easy it is to see whether dialogue is real, like an actual conversation. I wrote a book once in The World in Shadow. I actually put a conversation in that was verbatim between a young couple that was sitting at the next table at a coffee shop. And I thought it was interesting because it actually read a little bit more false, even though it was the only real conversation in the entire book, because it's not what you expect. So, anyhow, just pay attention. Pay attention and be very, very skeptical, and don't take the official stories too seriously. They're almost always false in some degree. They're almost always incorrect with regards to some degree of detail. Anyhow, that's enough about the wind-up toy thing. I want to address something else. I saw this comment, and I wanted to point it out. I'm not going to mention the commenter's name or anything. It's not about him. It's about the principle involved. One of the things that, so I find this interesting, and let's see if you can spot they are wrong or lying. I try not to ignore it, judging others and myself. I'm not a psychologist, but this seems precisely the kind of thing that can drive you to failure avoidance or conflict avoidance. Again, this might just be for me. If you want to get any better, stop feeding this thing. Try to conflict with somebody in the moment instead of later in your head, no matter what you feel that will make you look like. This will make you look dumb short term, but better at conflict eventually. Realize that people rarely think about you. No matter what you do with your voice or face or tone, it makes you look fake and worse, not better. Stop policing yourself so hard in front of others. Women will probably feel more comfortable around you if you stop winding up so tight right when you become aware of them. Stop resenting. Now, this is what I find fascinating about this is that most of what he's saying is true. Most of what he's saying is correct. But what's the first thing that he starts trying to do? He starts trying to help other people. He starts trying to give advice. He starts trying to put himself in a position that is superior, even as he admits that he has a problem of low status. I mean, to me, this demonstrates what a challenge it is to modify your behavioral patterns because they come out so naturally. I mean, I'm very, very, just so you understand, I'm very, very skeptical and suspicious of people who are really enthusiastic about me and who are, really want to help and really want to volunteer and really want to get involved in that sort of thing. Because I know perfectly well, those are the gammas in most cases. And so, and sure enough, when you do accept help from somebody like that, they will almost immediately explain to you why they can't help. No, I'm not blowing this guy up. I'm not even criticizing this guy. What I'm saying is that this is somebody who is working on his behavioral patterns, but even in the process of trying to work on his behavioral patterns, you can see the gamma behavioral pattern. And that's why I try to caution people that you're not going to change yourself overnight. You're not going to change yourself in 6 months. You can improve. And if you're actually determined to improve, you will improve. But you're always going to deal with those patterns, even when you don't believe you are. Even when you think you're changing the pattern, you might be engaging in it. And so that's the gamma behavioral pattern has been described in great detail. Go watch the video on Voxiversity on gammas or on the social sexual hierarchy. I'm not going to explain the same thing over and over and over and over and over again for each new viewer. Yeah, you can't flip a switch. It's always funny how, last night, for example, that's why I prefaced my statements with saying, I don't want to hear advice or recommendations or theories from anyone. I'm not interested in that, because the people that seem to be most inclined to give you advice are the people that don't actually do it. That always drives me crazy. One of my brothers, he used to announce what he was doing. Well, I'm doing I'm doing 30 sit-ups every morning now. I said, when? He said, what do you mean when? I said, I had to wake you up and, drag you out of bed so that you got to work on time. When did you do these sit-ups? He said, oh, well, no, I'm planning to start. I'm like, planning to start is not what you're doing. What you're doing is stuff that you are already doing already. If you've done it for a month, then go ahead and talk about it. But if you've only done it for a day or two, or in this case, you haven't even done it yet, don't talk about it. Don't tell people about it. There's some great advice in Graduating Gamma where he says, if you're a Gamma, the first thing that you're going to be tempted to do is to tell everybody how you're changing. It's like, don't do that. Change and let people see it. If you genuinely change, they will notice. A friend of mine was a big influence on my becoming a Christian because I noticed the change in his behavior. Turned out he'd been going to church for months, and I don't remember if he'd actually gotten baptized already or was planning to, but he had become a Christian. And I noticed that in his behavior. He didn't tell me. I saw it, and that is the best testimony of all. When people can actually see the change in your life for themselves, you don't need to tell them. If you do it right, then they will notice. Don't tell people that you're doing crunches and planks and this and that sort of thing. Just wait till summer. You take your shirt off, you got a six-pack, people will notice. I promise you. Let's see here. Okay, we got some super chats to address. Let me address them. Christopher G says, is it possible to write a tragic novel for kids without being too traumatic? Oh yeah, there's a whole subgenre of that usually, but I do think that it is important for children to be exposed to real life. I don't think that it's a good idea for parents to hide their grief from kids. I don't think it's a good idea for parents to hide their anger from kids. People know, kids know, Our kids used to get, I don't fight that much with my wife, but when we would get in arguments, It would initially stress the kids a bit, but once they learn that that didn't change either our relationship with each other or our relationship to them, they relaxed. It ceased to become a big deal. And so that's why I think that exposing them to real life stresses in a limited fashion is not a bad idea. Watership Down is maybe a bit on the creepy side, but that level of things kids can handle. Gran Torino says, sorry I'm late. Evening from rainy Ireland. Good evening. I actually like Ireland. I realize it's probably a bit different now but I always like the countryside. Duralex Sedlex says, I know guys who are literally buying their 5th AR or AK in plate carriers and building disguised lock boxes under the rear seats of their trucks just in case. Yeah, I doubt that there's going to be many mass shootings that happen around people who do that, is my guess. Because you realize the one thing they can't possibly afford is, stage a false flag and have some, concealed carry guy take them out, and then suddenly they're trying to explain why, there's 3 dead ATF agents in the shopping mall. So I think that if you simply stay out of gun-free zones, you'll probably be able to avoid these situations. So, and in terms of improving your life, improving your patterns of behavior, the best thing that you can do, the one thing that you can do relatively easily, is tell the truth with kindness. Don't tell the truth just to tell the truth, just to be brutal. Just as long as you know that you're doing so with a reasonable degree of kindness, tell the truth. Alaska Bear points out the Sutherland church shooter was taken out by an NRA instructor. Yes, and that's why I think that that was probably almost certainly not a false flag. Legionnaire Bear says, Vox, I'm very enthusiastic about you and Big Bear. Legionnaire Bear, you're supposed to be watching your super chats, so be strong. But thank you. Angry Polar Bear says, I have trouble with the kindness part. I'm not very patient. Oh, I'm told that I do too. Stranger Danger says, I have a problem being brutally honest. I have to work on that. You don't have to be brutal. Just be honest. You have to be willing to pay the price when you tell people what they don't want to hear. People don't like truth tellers, but they will accept truth tellers. Eric Carson, stop asking about the name. If you want to know what the names of the races I created in my fantasy novels are, read the fantasy novels. Come on. But more importantly, don't repeat the same question over and over again. Yeah, and in fact, let's see. Vox, do you think it's worth being honest to those who won't even engage with you? Well, then don't engage with them. But yes, you should be honest, because people begin to understand that you're not bluffing. They begin to understand that you mean what you say. And it is valuable when even your enemies understand that. I've said this before, but the the highest compliment I think I've ever been paid was when someone who said very forthrightly they didn't like me and didn't approve of my crime think, but they did say that the one thing that they were willing to say for me is that I'm honest on the internet. They said if I said the sky was green, they wouldn't even bother to look out the window because I don't lie about stuff like that. So, Paraplegic Bear's got a good point. I know one shooting that wasn't a false flag, 1993 in Baltimore when I was shot. Definitely no crisis actors. Well, you don't know that it wasn't a false flag. You know it wasn't a hoax. False flag just means that the people who did it were not necessarily the people who were reported doing it. Thomas Parker has issues. He says, I try to speak truth, but sometimes people are so mind-numbingly stupid, I get to the point where all I want to do is inflict emotional pain on them until they shut up. Why? That is a gamma mindset. You should just, tell them to shut up or leave. There's nothing wrong with telling people, I'm not interested in that. There are few things that are less interesting to me than people talking in an animated way about people that I neither know nor care about. I prefer ideas to people, and I really don't care about people that I don't know. So, when people start doing that, I either quietly exit or I explain that I'm not going to take part in that conversation. But there's no need to be mean about it. There's no need to try to inflict pain on them. That's ridiculous. Ed Chair is enthusiastic as well. Thank you, Ed. Your enthusiasm is noted and appreciated. Is Gollum from Lord of the Rings a gamma? Yes. A false flag could be real. Yes. A false flag, by definition, a false flag is real. A false flag could also be a hoax. The way that the term is used now, yes, but generally speaking, properly, a false flag is real. It means something happened, but the party that is supposed to be responsible was not responsible. Dr. Zume says, is it possible to be good at strategy and not tactics? Thank you for your continued work. Sure. But, typically, if you're good at one, you're probably at least competent at the other. There's not very many people who are really good at one and terrible at the other. There's a lot more people that are good at tactics. It's easier to train tactics. Strategy is something that there's a science to tactics. Strategy remains mostly art. Now, logistics is also a science, but interestingly enough, being good at logistics doesn't mean that you're good at either strategy or tactics. Two examples of that are McClellan in the Civil War. He was very good at building an army. He just was useless when it came to using it. In another example, if you've seen Band of Brothers, is Captain Sobalt. He was dreadfully bad when it came to tactics. Wouldn't have even registered when it came to strategy, but he actually was quite good at training the men. So, there's different pieces there's different elements that matter. Well, actually, an important thing. This is something that I was told by a someone with a lot of experience in military and paramilitary situations. He said that if somebody is standing more than 10 feet away from you, as long as you are moving rapidly and in a perpendicular direction, about the only way that you'll get shot is bad luck. They, especially when half the time people are, these people in these situations, you can see from the videos that have been shown and stuff, people are not even aiming. So, anyhow, I can't testify whether that's true or not, but that is somebody who does have a lot of serious respect in that regard. Bob Anderson points out, the most common misconception regarding false flags that I run into is that they are false events. Right? False does not mean hoax. It means identity. It refers to the identity. Can you stand in direct sunlight and not melt true blood style? Sure. I was just doing it today. Your gay says, I'm the real enthusiast. Haha. Well, he said haha. That means he must be right. Oh, for crying out loud. What part of male sociosexual hierarchy is hard to understand? Does the sexual hierarchy explain women too? No. Can a woman be alpha? No. Does the sexual hierarchy apply to women at all? No. Is it not acceptable to inflict emotional pain through rhetoric when the other ignores facts? No, it's not. Them ignoring facts is not an attack on you. You are attacking them. You are the instigator. You are the offender. If they are attacking you, if they are attempting to inflict emotional pain on you, then your response is justified. But when they're just doing what they're doing, I mean, it's like, it's like punching a child because he annoyed you. The child annoyed you, but the child didn't attack you. Your perspective is excessively narcissistic. What are your thoughts on who the Nephilim were? The Nephilim were the children of the angels and human women. It's pretty clear in the Bible. I don't know why. I don't even know why that's a question. Why would someone want to lower their status in the hierarchy? There's a lot of people who don't want to be alphas. Bravos don't want to be alphas. Deltas are terrified of finding themselves in an alpha position. About the only people who want to be alphas who are not are gammas. Sigmas are constantly getting drafted to be alphas and simply will not do it. Question, what is a hoblet? There's no real description. It's just basically something akin to a hobbit. I just sort of threw them in as a the whole story was a metaphor. I wrote that before I was thinking about writing a whole epic fantasy series. Do you think the giant skeletons with double rows of teeth are Nephilim? I don't know. Could be. Can you give me an example of being drafted? Sure. I once flew to a foreign country under the impression that I was going to be asked to do some consulting. And when I walked in, I ran into the general counsel and the CEO of the mother company. And the first thing that the CEO said is, "And here's our new CEO." And my first response was, "Oh, hell no." You know, I didn't ask for the job. I didn't want the job. And they intentionally manipulated the situation to appeal to my sense of responsibility in order to draft me for the job. And I would have been a lot better off if I had, followed my instincts and turned around and flown right back home. So yeah, that's an example of being drafted. Buonasera. Everybody knows about Michael Behe's irreducible complexity response to evolution. That's like ancient news. No, I don't do Olympic lifts. At least I don't think so. I don't life. And then they ask me the same question again. I have a bad tendency of repeating my answer in a offensively drawn out and slightly louder way. So pretty much no one likes that. What did the founding fathers call their descendants? Posterity. Social Galactic's coming. It's coming soon. Can we send you our gamma tails to read out? No. No. Some differences between Omega and Sigma. Omegas are on the bottom of the social hierarchy. If they were in it, they're not in it. But if they were in it, they would be at the bottom. Sigmas are also out of it, but they would be at the top. So for example, the Omega is the person who never goes to the party. And if he showed up at the party, literally everybody would say, "What is he doing here?" The Sigma is the guy who shows up at the party with a pretty girl that nobody has ever seen or met before. And people are genuinely surprised and pleased to see that he showed up. That's the difference. Who invited him? Not necessarily anyone. It's like one of those things where the word gets around. He's of a sufficiently high social status that he knows he can attend. What's the most irritating thing about living in a foreign country? Probably not knowing how the bureaucracy works. It takes a while to get used to the differing forms of bureaucracy. There's all these little assumptions that you don't even know you have. And so working them out takes several years. If a patriotic nationalist has absolutely nothing to lose but no real discernible talents, what could you recommend that they do for the movement? Whatever they feel capable of doing that they believe is right to do. You know, support those who support you. Is it gamma to be 33 years old, verbally abuse your girlfriend, and bragging about the merits of your family and not your own? Possibly, but the fact that there's a girlfriend there might mean that it's just a delta who's a prick. Is it possible to be too patient? Yes. What about when a leftist is spreading propaganda? Is it permissible to attack them with rhetoric? Yes. Have you spoken with Faith Goldie lately? I don't talk about my personal relationships with other people. Has the Italian mafia got to you yet, Vox, or are they sneaking around? My friend and pastor is Sicilian. Let's see. Yeah, no Taco Bell. That is. Nope. We finally can get Jif. In fact, I had some today. Are gammas just failed alphas? No. Who do you think is the second greatest NBA player of all time? That's a good question. I think probably Magic Johnson. So, all right. Well, that's it for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was useful in some way. Please stop by Unauthorized TV. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I strongly recommend you do so because we have our new documentary coming out in a month or so, 4 to 6 weeks. And we'll look forward to seeing you there. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next Darkstream. Why won't that turn on? Oh, there we go. Well, apparently I can't turn that on, so we'll just turn it off this way. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.